My name is Clara. I grew up in what looked like the textbook definition of the American dream, a two-story colonial house with a white picket fence in the suburbs of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. For most of my childhood, my father, Robert, we called him Bob, was my world, a hero sculpted in crisp suits and possessing the gentlest, most knowing smile. But the perfect picture started to crack when I was 12, and it was a breakdown that ultimately led to the biggest emotional showdown of my life. Bob wasn't just a good father. He was my hero, sculpted in crisp suits and possessing the gentlest, most knowing smile. He worked as a financial advisor, and in my young eyes, he was basically the king of the world, capable of solving any problem from a leaky faucet to the mysteries of the solar system. Every morning, without fail, he'd sit with me at the kitchen island while my mom, Elaine, packed my lunch. I can still hear the comforting clink of his spoon against his ceramic coffee mug. He didn't ask generic questions like, "How's school?" He'd lean in his salt and pepper hair, which appeared way too early in his 30s, catching the light, and he'd ask, "What impossible thing are you going to achieve today, Clara?" He had this way of making me feel like my small 8-year-old brain was the most magnificent engine on the planet. "You have the brightest mind, kiddo. You're going to change the world someday." Those words weren't just compliments, they were a foundation. They made me dive into every school project, the science fair volcano, the diorama of the Civil War battle, with a ferocious enthusiasm that most kids reserve for video games. I knew he was invested, and when I brought home a report card with straight A's, the ritual was sacred. He'd tape it proudly to the refrigerator, take me for a massive double-scoop ice cream cone, and let me talk his ear off about the latest novel I was reading. My mom, Elaine, was the anchor that kept our often ambitious household from drifting too far. She was a registered nurse, possessing that innate patience and warmth that only someone who spends their life caring for others truly has. She was the one who taught me how to bake her famous chocolate chip cookies. The secret was extra vanilla extract, you guys, and she'd spend hours helping me understand the complex plot points in Shakespeare, even though English literature wasn't her natural element. Mom was the peacekeeper, balancing my dad's sometimes intense focus with her gentle, grounding presence. She made sure that my older sister, Brooke, and I, despite our differences, felt equally seen and loved. Brooke was 3 years older, tall, athletic, and effortlessly popular, everything I wasn't, petite, bookish, and prone to tripping over air. Even before the tragedy, our dynamic was complicated. Brooke thrived on the sports field. I thrived in the quiet solitude of the library. My mom always celebrated our different strengths, but Brooke, even back then, seemed to view every praise directed at me as a personal slight. She had this competitive streak that felt less like sibling rivalry and more like quiet resentment. But the shift, the true cataclysmic break in our perfect picture, occurred when I was 12. The tulips in the front yard had just bloomed, Mom's favorite vibrant yellow ones, when she started complaining about persistent fatigue. Within 3 months, the doctor's visit, the whispered consultations, and the chilling phrase "stage 4 pancreatic cancer" shattered the glass ceiling of our secure, happy world. The following 6 months were not a blur, as some people describe trauma. They were painfully, microscopically clear. The sterile smell of the hospital, the way Mom's vibrant brown eyes slowly lost their light, the hollow sound of my father's forced laugh when he tried to lighten the mood. It's all etched into my memory like a terrible inscription. When Mom passed, she didn't just leave a void. She left a deep, unaddressed wound. Dad, the man who used to teach me how to catch a baseball and build magnificent science projects, suddenly crumbled. He didn't cry much in front of us, but he vanished. Not physically at first, but emotionally. He threw himself into his work with a vengeance that was unsettling. The firm that once employed him became his sanctuary, often keeping him at the office until 9 or 10 p.m. I suspect now that the crisp suits and the financial spreadsheets were his new shield, protecting him from the unbearable silence of our two-story colonial. He was avoiding the painful emptiness that Mom's absence had left, and in doing so, he left a new, even more dangerous vacuum in our home. And let me tell you, vacuums never stay empty for long. My sister, Brooke, at only 15, was more than ready to fill it. She saw not a tragedy, but an opportunity. The dynamic was about to shift, not just between us kids and Dad, but in a way that would ultimately redefine what family meant to me. It's a bitter truth to accept, but the death of our mother didn't bring us closer. It became the catalyst for a decade of subtle, calculated emotional warfare. The hero father I knew was slowly fading, replaced by a grieving, preoccupied man, and the stage was perfectly set for Brooke to take over. And she did with manipulative precision. I remember thinking, even at that age, this isn't grief, this is a power play. And I knew, deep down, that I was already losing the battle. The silence in the house, where once there had been my mom's laughter and the clatter of baking sheets, was now just an echo, and in that echo, Brooke's voice grew louder and more commanding. She was becoming the new lady of the house, and our father, in his pain, was too blind or perhaps too grateful to notice the darkness in her heart. I wish I could tell you that things got better, that Dad woke up, or that Brooke suddenly developed conscience. But that's not how real family trauma works. It compounds, it festers, and it sets the scene for the kind of emotional showdown you usually only see in the movies. But for me, this was just the beginning of my story. The vacuum my father's emotional absence created was, as I mentioned, quickly filled by Brooke. At 15, she didn't step up as a grieving child. She stepped into the role of the self-appointed matriarch. And let me tell you, watching a teenager try to run a house is unsettling enough, but watching her do it with calculated intent is chilling. Dad is dealing with enough without your constant neediness, Clara, she'd hiss at me whenever I dared to ask when he might be home for dinner. She'd stand in the doorway of the kitchen, arms crossed, the self-righteous glow of martyrdom shining around her. He has important clients. We need to be strong for him. She always used the collective, we, but she clearly meant, I, Brooke, am strong, and you, Clara, are a burden. I watched this transformation with a mix of bewilderment and resentment. Brooke, who had barely mastered boiling water before Mom died, started cooking meals. They were inedible, of course, oversalted, undercooked, and definitely nothing like Mom's famous lasagna. But Dad would eat them silently, praising her effort with a gratitude that felt desperate. He needed a hero, and Brooke was providing a distorted, selfish version of one. His relationship with her strengthened out of shared responsibility, or perhaps shared denial, while my relationship with him began its slow, painful deterioration. The business success that followed Mom's death only accelerated the process. Dad was promoted to senior partner at his financial firm, bringing in more money, which meant a fancier car, but also even less time and more emotional distance. Brooke saw the money not as a comfort, but as another tool in her arsenal. She became a master manipulator, using guilt and subtle emotional tactics to cement her position as his favorite, the reliable daughter, the one who understood. Her technique was brilliant in its simplicity, misdirection, and omission. She wouldn't tell outright lies. She would simply sculpt the narrative. I remember needing $60 for high-quality art supplies for a major school project, an art history presentation Dad had actually agreed to help me with. I left the receipt on the counter. Brooke saw it. Later that night, as Dad finally staggered in at 10, exhausted and smelling of airport terminal coffee, I heard them talking. "Oh, Dad, don't worry about the dishes," Brooke said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I know you're tired. Just try to talk to Clara, okay?" "About what, honey?" Dad mumbled, loosening his tie. "Well, she just spent $60 on art supplies," Brooke sighed, putting just enough emphasis on the word spent to imply frivolousness. "I know things are tight now that it's just us, but she just seems to be interested in things like that lately. I worry she's not being responsible." She conveniently omitted the school project part and the fact that the money was necessary. Dad, too tired to investigate, just rubbed his temples. "I'll talk to her in the morning, Brooke. Thanks for handling things." The conversation never happened in the morning. Instead, I got a clipped, disappointed look from him that said, "You're being reckless." Brooke had won that round without ever raising her voice. As I entered high school, Brooke's false narrative solidified. To Dad, I was the rebellious one, the ungrateful one, the one only interested in my friends and my esoteric books. The truth was, I had retreated into my studies, my art and literature, not because I was ungrateful, but because those were the only places I could cope with the double loss. The loss of my mother and the slow, agonizing loss of the man who used to be my father. The ultimate sting, the one that still makes my blood run cold, came during my junior year. I had been nominated for a prestigious art scholarship, a major milestone. The award ceremony was a Thursday night. I had reminded Dad for weeks, printing the invitation, circling the date on his calendar. I was counting the seconds. The night before, I was doing homework in my room, the door slightly ajar when I overheard Brooke on the phone with him. "Dad, she told me she really doesn't want you to make a big deal out of tomorrow." Brooke's voice was low, conspiratorial. "She said having you there might actually make her nervous. You know how shy she is. Honestly, maybe just send a card or something. She understands you're busy with the San Francisco merger." I remember the blood draining from my face. Nervous? I had been counting the days. The next evening, I sat alone in the auditorium. I walked up onto that stage, accepted the award, and forced a smile for the single photographer present. I scanned the room for a familiar face, hoping Brooke had lied, that Dad had shown up anyway. But there was only the sea of proud, smiling parents surrounding other students. Dad's congratulatory text arrived an hour later, mentioning an unavoidable, important client dinner. Later, I found out from his assistant, a lovely woman named Sarah who still cared about me, that Brooke had called his office earlier that day, claiming I had asked to reschedule the ceremony, causing him to book the conflicting meeting. When I finally confronted Brooke, not with tears but with cold, calculated rage, she didn't flinch. She just shrugged her tall, athletic shoulders dismissively rolling. "Oh, Clara, you always want all the attention. It's pathetic. It's my turn to be the priority now." That was the moment I realized I was not fighting a sister. I was fighting a saboteur. I had to get out. By 18, I didn't just want to leave for college. I needed an escape route. I applied to schools as far away as possible, choosing the University of Pittsburgh, 5 hours away. The partial scholarship I received feeling less like an honor and more like a golden ticket to freedom. The toxic environment wasn't just the house anymore, it was the entire dynamic. I had lost both parents in two very different ways, and I was desperate to find a world where my achievements weren't immediately weaponized against me. I was leaving the shadows of Bethlehem for good, determined to build a life where I was chosen, not tolerated. Leaving home for Pittsburgh felt like shedding a heavy skin. The drive to the University of Pittsburgh campus was the longest 5 hours of my life, but the closer I got, the lighter I felt. I embraced campus life fiercely, limiting my visits home to major holidays, where I would brace myself for Brooke's subtle jabs and Dad's distant, polite inquiries. I was done trying to earn back a father who seemed determined to believe the worst about me. It was during my sophomore year, tucked away in a dimly lit lecture hall for an English literature class, that the real rebuilding began. This is where I met Ethan. He was tall, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and a mind that ran with the sharp, beautiful logic of an engineer. He missed a crucial lecture due to a nasty bout of the flu and, in a moment of panic, asked to borrow my meticulous, color-coded notes. Our initial coffee meeting, me explaining the finer points of romantic poetry, him offering to tutor me in calculus, turned into a sprawling, 3-hour conversation. Within a month, we were inseparable. I quickly learned that Ethan was everything my home life hadn't been. Stable, honest, and unequivocally supportive. But the real revelation was his family. Ethan came from a family that was, quite frankly, loud, messy, and wonderfully present. I remember the first time I went to their house in the suburbs of Pittsburgh for a Sunday dinner. The chaos, the football game blaring in the background, the smell of garlic and roast chicken, the constant, good-natured banter was overwhelming in the best possible way. His mother, Diana, was a kindergarten teacher, a woman with warm brown eyes and an almost magical talent for making anyone who walked through her door feel like they were the most important person in the room. She was the one who, on our second visit, simply handed me an apron and asked if I wanted to help her roll out the pasta dough, not as a chore, but as an invitation. His father, Henry, was a civil engineer with a dry, sharp sense of humor. He didn't discuss business with Ethan. He asked him about his dreams. He didn't ask me about my grades. He asked me what kind of stories I wanted to tell with my art and my writing. And then there was Uncle George. George wasn't related by blood to Diana, but he was Henry's older brother, and they had a bond thicker than any DNA. George was in his early 60s, a retired English professor with silver hair and kind, discerning eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had never married and had no children of his own, but he doted on Ethan and his younger brother, Leo, as if they were his own sons. George was quiet, a man of careful observation, but when he spoke, the world stopped and listened. At every gathering, George made a point to seek me out. While other relatives asked polite, disinterested questions about my major, George would pull me into deep conversations about literary theory, the state of modern art, or the philosophical implications of my latest paper. He didn't just listen, he heard me. He'd offer thoughtful, specific responses, sometimes challenging my viewpoint, but always respecting my intellect. "Clara," he said once after I showed him a marketing concept I was brainstorming for a mock project, "you have a remarkable eye for what motivates people. That is a rare and powerful gift." His genuine validation, untainted by the need for competition or control, was like a healing balm on the deep, festering wounds Brooke and Dad had left. Through 4 years of college and into our early careers, Ethan remained my unwavering anchor. He understood the nuances of my family trauma without ever judging or trying to fix it. He simply held me when the rare holiday visit left me in tears and cheered my achievements when my own father failed to even acknowledge them. After graduation, we moved to Philadelphia. I secured a position at a thriving marketing firm, leading campaigns for major clients, and Ethan joined an engineering consultancy. We rented a small apartment, pouring all our energy into our careers and our relationship, building our own little world, far from the shadows of Bethlehem. I maintained obligatory monthly phone calls with Dad. They were brief, superficial, and emotionally draining. A simple check-the-box exercise. Brooke, now working in real estate and still living in the hometown, continued to position herself as the responsible daughter, the one who was taking care of Dad. She made sure to remind me of this perceived self-sacrifice during the rare occasions we spoke. By the time I was 27, I had been promoted to marketing executive. Ethan had advanced significantly in his field as well. Our life was everything I had envisioned, fulfilling, supportive, and built on mutual respect. The wounds from my childhood remained, a dull ache, not a searing pain. But I had created a new reality where I was seen, valued, and loved unconditionally. The question wasn't if we would get married, it was when. And I knew, despite the stability of my new life, that the decision to involve my family, specifically my father, in that pivotal moment would be the ultimate test of how much I had truly healed. That test, I would soon learn, was already on the horizon. Our 5th anniversary arrived like a beautifully wrapped promise. Ethan had planned the entire day meticulously, a nostalgic journey back to the start of our relationship. It began with breakfast at the small cafe where we first exchanged notes, followed by a quiet afternoon at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, my favorite, and culminated in dinner at the Italian restaurant where we had celebrated my college graduation. Everything was perfect, the kind of day that felt less like a celebration and more like a gentle affirmation of our life together. When the waiter brought the dessert, a decadent tiramisu I adore, a small, velvet box was nestled right beside it. Ethan took my hands across the white linen tablecloth, his kind eyes shining with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Clara, these past 5 years have been the best of my life. Your creativity, your kindness, and your incredible strength amaze me every single day. I want to spend the rest of my life building our world with you. Will you marry me?" The ring was stunning, a vintage-style sapphire surrounded by tiny, brilliant diamonds. Ethan later told me he chose it because it reminded him of my artistic spirit. Unique, deep, and absolutely not conventional. Tears streamed down my face, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I said yes a dozen times before I even let him slip the ring onto my finger. In the euphoric glow of that moment, I consciously pushed away the anxiety of sharing the news with my birth family. For one perfect evening, I wanted to simply be happy, free from the shadow of past disappointments. But reality, as it often does, waited until the next morning. I called my father, Bob, during my lunch break. After exchanging the usual pleasantries, the weather, his latest investment strategy, the superficiality we had perfected, I took a deep breath. "Dad, I wanted you to know that Ethan proposed last night, and I said yes." The pause on the line was a beat too long, stretching out into an awkward silence that felt like a familiar punch to the gut. "Well, congratulations, Clara," he finally said. His tone wasn't excited. It was merely appropriate, the kind of flat inflection he'd use if a junior analyst had successfully filed a quarterly report. There was no question about the proposal, no joy, no offer to celebrate. Just practical inquiries. "He seems like a good guy. Have you set a date?" "Not yet," I replied, trying desperately to mask the sudden, sharp disappointment in my voice. "We're thinking maybe next summer. Let me know when you decide." "I should check my calendar," he finished, his voice already sounding distant, as if he were multitasking. After hanging up, I sat on our couch, fighting the urge to cry. Ethan found me there and immediately understood the silence. "He'll come around, sweetheart," Ethan assured me, though I could tell his conviction was wavering. Even he, with his warm, boisterous family, was starting to grasp the depth of my father's emotional unavailability. Brooke's reaction was, predictably, a masterclass in passive aggression. When I texted her the news with a photo of the ring, her response was effusively congratulatory, to the point of being utterly insincere. OMG, congrats, little sis. So happy for you. That ring is so pretty. The excessive exclamation points and emojis couldn't mask the seething jealousy I knew lay beneath. Brooke, at 32, had a string of short-lived relationships, but had never managed to secure a long-term commitment. My happiness was clearly her inconvenience. Despite the lukewarm reception from my side, Ethan and I pressed ahead with the planning. We settled on June 15th as our wedding date, giving us 9 months to arrange everything. The date worked perfectly for Ethan's family and my closest friends, and, crucially, Dad confirmed his availability. We sent the save the date cards 8 months in advance. The next time I spoke to Dad, he actually sounded somewhat engaged. I put it in the calendar, Clara. Brooke mentioned it to me as well. Gathering my courage, I ventured carefully. Actually, Dad, I was hoping you would walk me down the aisle. Another pause. But this time, when he spoke, I detected something genuine, a flicker of the old Bob. I would be honored, Clara. That single moment of connection, that honor, gave me a dangerous sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this momentous occasion would be the bridge we needed to finally heal the distance. Maybe the man who used to tell me I would change the world was still in there, buried beneath years of grief and Brooke's manipulation. The following months were a blur of venue tours, catering tastings, and dress fittings. We chose a beautiful historic hotel in Philadelphia with a garden terrace for the ceremony. Ethan's mother, Diana, joined me for many appointments, offering gentle suggestions and radiating excitement. She was the mother figure I desperately needed. "You are going to be the most beautiful bride," Diana told me during my first dress fitting, tears glistening in her eyes as I stepped out in a fitted lace gown. In that moment, the absence of my own mother hit me acutely, but Diana immediately sensed it, gently squeezing my hand. "Your mom would be so incredibly proud of the woman you've become, sweetheart." As the planning continued, I found myself leaning even more on Ethan's family. And, unexpectedly, I grew much closer to Uncle George. George, Ethan's uncle, was a constant, stabilizing presence. He would attend family planning sessions, the engagement party, the cake tasting, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He never pried about my family issues, but his kindness was a silent acknowledgement of them. He was a man who truly showed up, something my father had forgotten how to do. And I had a feeling that this gentle, silver-haired professor would play a far bigger role in my life than any of us could have possibly imagined. Little did I know the foundation for the deepest betrayal and the most profound act of human connection was already being laid, brick by manipulative brick, back in Bethlehem. The countdown to the ultimate showdown was on. The closer I got to Uncle George, the more glaring the contrast became between the family I was born into and the family I was actively choosing. George wasn't just kind, he was insightful. He was in his early 60s, a retired professor, and his life, while quiet, seemed richer and more purpose-driven than anyone I knew. He had a natural ability to connect, to see the deeper currents beneath the surface of conversation. I recall a quiet Sunday dinner at Diana and Henry's house. I was showing George a challenging marketing campaign I developed for a nonprofit client, a campaign I was genuinely proud of. I expected a polite nod, but George studied the material for 10 minutes. "This is brilliant, Clara," he finally said, looking up, his eyes serious. "You're not selling a product. You're selling a mission." You understand the difference between attention and engagement. That's more than just marketing. It's understanding the human heart." His words, specific and affirming, resonated more deeply than any professional compliment I'd ever received. He treated my career, my art, and my thoughts with an intellectual respect that Dad had completely withdrawn. It was during this dinner that George casually mentioned he had already reserved a hotel room in Philadelphia for the wedding weekend. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he said with his warm, gentle smile. "I've already bought a new suit for the occasion." That simple, genuine enthusiasm, the kind of pure, unadulterated excitement a father should show, was a stark contrast to my own family's responses. Dad confirmed his attendance, but never initiated a single question about the seating chart or the catering. Brooke had declined to be a bridesmaid, citing demanding work commitments, though she said she would attend as a guest. Her refusal didn't hurt as much as it liberated me. I didn't need her toxic energy next to me on the most important day of my life. Then, about 5 months before the wedding, the troubling signs started. Brooke began dropping vague, cryptic comments on social media, primarily on Instagram, her platform of choice for showing off her perpetually perfect and manufactured life. She posted photos of venue scouting, captions discussing catering options for a major celebration, and repeatedly mentioned June as the target date. A knot of anxiety started tightening in my stomach. When I called her to ask about it, she was dismissive. "Oh, that, just something for work, Clara. You know, a big corporate event. Nothing for you to worry your little head about." But the posts continued. Photos tagging local country clubs, talking about firm sponsorship, and always hinting at June 15th. I tried to dismiss it as Brooke's usual need for attention, but the timing felt too deliberate, too malicious. I pushed the fear down, focusing instead on finalizing our own plans. The last dress fittings, the photographer's schedule, the floral arrangements. Then, 3 months before our wedding day, the bombshell dropped. Brooke called me on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was dripping with a fall sweetness, so thick it was practically saccharine. "Clara, I wanted to let you know personally before you see it on the corporate page." Her dramatic pause was calculated. "I'm hosting my career achievement party on June 15th. I finally hit my sales target to become a senior broker, and the firm is throwing me a huge celebration. It's going to be massive, hundreds of people." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Brooke, that is my wedding day. You received the save the date card 8 months ago." "Did I?" She feigned surprise, the sound of her voice the verbal equivalent of a venomous snake. "Oh, it must have totally slipped my mind when I was planning with the firm. Anyway, it's just a coincidence that the dates overlap. My event is earlier in the day, starting at 11 at the country club. It should be winding down around the time your ceremony starts at 4. So it works out perfectly." "Perfectly?" I repeated, my voice rising sharply, trembling with outrage. "You're scheduling a party on my wedding day, knowing Dad will have to choose." "Dad can attend both events, silly," she replied smoothly, the sound of ice clinking in her glass audible through the phone. "He's so proud of my achievement. He'll make it to your wedding too. It's not that far a drive." I knew she was lying. The prestigious country club she mentioned was nearly 2 hours from our venue in Philadelphia. It would be physically impossible for anyone, especially the father of the bride who needed to be there early, to attend her event and make it to my ceremony on time. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a coup. Brooke wanted to force Dad's hand, to make him publicly choose her achievement over my milestone. As soon as I hung up, my hands shaking with a cocktail of fury and fear. I called my father. The hope I had nurtured for months, that he would finally stand up for me, was hanging by a thread. "Dad, did you know Brooke scheduled her work party on my wedding day?" "Yes, she mentioned it," he replied, with infuriating casualness. "It's unfortunate timing, Clara, but these major corporate events are hard to reschedule. It's a big achievement for her." "But Dad, how will you attend both? You're supposed to walk me down the aisle." I pleaded, the desperate plea breaking through my composure. "I'll make it work, Clara. I'll go to the first part of Brooke's event, and then drive over for your ceremony. There's no need to make this a bigger issue than it is." He was already rationalizing. He was already choosing the path of least resistance. He was already choosing Brooke's manufactured importance over my genuine milestone. And I knew, deep in my gut, that this was the beginning of the end of the final, fragile hope I had held onto. The cold, brutal truth of my sister's resentment and my father's tragic blindness was about to be laid bare on the most important day of my life. The weeks that followed were a torturous, drawn-out countdown to a confrontation I dreaded. I could sense Dad wavering during our obligatory calls. He began mentioning the traffic between Bethlehem and Philadelphia, asking if we could push the ceremony back an hour, even wondering if I truly needed him for the pre-wedding photos. Each question was a subtle, emotional retreat, a small, selfish preparation for his final, unforgivable choice. "Clara, I really think you should consider moving the ceremony to 5 p.m., he pushed during one call, his tone implying I was being unreasonable. "It would give me time to make my speech for Brooke and get to the city without stressing out." "Dad, the venue is booked, the caterers are set. The invitations were mailed 6 months ago. Everything is scheduled for 4 o'clock, I shot back, frustration eroding my composure. "The entire timeline of a wedding revolves around that ceremony time, and your daughter is getting married." "I know that, Clara, but this is a career milestone for Brooke. She needs me there. You and Ethan are stable. You'll be fine. You'll be fine." That phrase stung, cutting through years of therapy and healing. It was the ultimate dismissal. My happiness was secondary, my needs were negotiable, and my sister's manufactured crisis was the priority. I was the stable one, which meant I could take the hit. Despite the growing tension, the wedding plans steamrolled ahead. Final dress fittings, meetings with a photographer, confirming flower arrangements, assembling welcome bags for the out-of-town guests. The meticulous details of wedding planning became a welcome distraction from the brewing family storm. Ethan and his family remained pillars of support, though I could see the genuine concern in Diana's eyes every time she asked about Dad's travel arrangements. Then, just 2 weeks before the wedding, the call came that confirmed my darkest fears. It was a Tuesday evening. I was spread out on the living room floor, reviewing the seating charts, when my phone chimed with Dad's number. I answered, a chill running down my spine. The formality in his voice told me everything before he even started speaking. "Clara, I need to talk to you about the wedding." I gripped the phone, the pen slipping from my hand. "I'm listening, Dad." "I've been thinking about the logistics for June 15th, he continued, his voice uncomfortable, defensive. "And I just don't think I can make it to the ceremony on time. Brooke's event is really important for her career, and as her father, I need to be there for the whole thing. The timing just doesn't work out." I fought to keep my voice steady, to stop the primal, desperate sobs that were gathering in my chest. "You are choosing not to walk me down the aisle at my wedding." "It's not about choosing," he insisted, falling back on the well-worn script. "It's about practical timing. Brooke's event is earlier, and I cannot be in two places at once. The hypocrisy was suffocating. He could be in two places. He was simply choosing which one mattered more to him. Maybe you could ask Ethan's father to walk you down the aisle. Or one of your friend's dads, he suggested, tossing out the idea with shocking nonchalance. I'm sure someone else can do it. Someone else. As if walking his only daughter down the aisle was an interchangeable task, a placeholder role that could be delegated to a stranger. It wasn't just a logistical cancellation. It was a rejection that reached back to every manipulated moment of my teenage years. I see, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper, empty of all emotion. I'll still come to the reception, he added quickly, offering the compromise like a generous bone. I should be able to make it by 7 or so, depending on the traffic. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just mumbled a choked goodbye and dropped the phone onto the carpet. The silence that followed was louder than any fight. The hope that had sustained me for months, the hope that Dad still loved me enough to show up, was officially dead. I collapsed onto the floor, the seating chart strewn around me, the names of all the people who loved me blurring through my tears. My father wasn't coming. He had chosen Brooke, and the public acknowledgement of that rejection felt like the cruelest betrayal of all. Ethan found me 20 minutes later when he returned from work. He took one look at me huddled there, the sound of my ragged breathing echoing in the apartment, and he understood instantly. He's not coming, I sobbed into his shoulder. He's choosing Brooke's party over walking me down the aisle. Ethan held me tightly, his own anger evident in the tense muscles of his back and the clench of his jaw. I am so sorry, Clara. He doesn't deserve you. That night, lying in bed, Ethan gently suggested postponing the wedding. We could move it to another date, sweetheart. Give your dad no excuse not to be there. We can wait. The thought crossed my mind, but something deep inside me, the spirit of the 12-year-old who lost her mother and then her father, rebelled fiercely. No, I said firmly, sitting up. I am not rearranging our entire lives because of Brooke's spiteful manipulations. That is exactly what she wants. This day is happening exactly on June 15th. It's for us, and I refuse to give her the power to diminish it. But the question remained heavy and inescapable. Who would walk me down the aisle that represented my past meeting my future? The thought of walking that path alone felt like an open, public acknowledgement of my father's final rejection. I knew I couldn't do it alone. The next move I made would define not just my wedding, but the family I would carry forward. And it was time to look beyond blood. The very next day, Ethan's mother, Diana, called. She sensed immediately that something was fundamentally wrong. Her voice, usually so bright and bustling, was low and deeply concerned. I found myself pouring out the entire heartbreaking story to her over the phone. The deliberate scheduling, the flimsy excuses, the final, gut-wrenching cancellation. I held nothing back, the years of pain and frustration finally spilling over. "Oh, sweetheart," Diana sighed, her voice filled with a powerful, palpable motherly concern that I hadn't realized I was starving for. "I cannot believe your father would do this to you. It's simply unforgivable." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, the exhaustion making my voice thin. Part of me wants to call and beg him to reconsider, but I know that's exactly what Brooke expects. She wants me to seem desperate, the needy little sister she's always painted me as. "Listen to me, Clara," Diana said, her voice snapping with a firm, decisive authority that cut through my self-pity. "This is your day, yours and Ethan's. Do not let anyone, especially not your sister or your father, diminish it. Your father is making a choice he will regret for the rest of his life. But that is his burden to bear, not yours. You must move forward. You deserve joy. Her words were a lifeline. They validated my anger while pushing me toward strength. But the immediate logistical question still loomed. The walk. Later that week, I received a call from someone entirely unexpected. Uncle George. "Ethan told me what happened," he said gently, his voice carrying the deep resonance of a man who had seen many of life's betrayals. "I hope you don't mind him sharing." "Of course not, George," I replied, touched that he would call to check on me. "I know this is a difficult time," he continued. "Family disappointments cut the deepest. They stick with you." Something in his tone suggested a profound, personal experience with this kind of pain. "It sounds like you understand," I murmured, a fresh wave of tears welling up. "More than you might guess, dear," George admitted, a sigh coming through the line. "My own father refused to attend my college graduation because he disapproved of my choice to study literature instead of joining the family construction business. He thought I was wasting my life. Some wounds never fully heal, Clara, but we learn to build beautiful lives despite them." His wisdom and kindness were a soothing balm. It was the first time an older family member, not counting Diana, had truly empathized with the pain of parental rejection. "Thank you for sharing that, George. For understanding. Anytime, dear. And remember, family is not just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when it matters." 1 week before the wedding, I hit emotional rock bottom. I found myself sitting on the bathroom floor late at night, overwhelmed by grief. The wedding was perfect, ready to go, but the gaping hole left by my father's absence felt cavernous. The next morning, Ethan gently nudged me. "Mom wants to take you out for lunch. Just the two of you." Diana was waiting at a quiet cafe, sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming mugs of tea. She stood to hug me tightly before we sat down. "Ethan is worried about you, sweetheart. We all are." "I'm trying to be strong," I replied, stirring my tea restlessly. "I keep telling myself it doesn't matter, that I'm better off without Dad there, but then I think about walking into the ceremony alone, and I just feel abandoned." "It's okay to feel that way, Clara," Diana finished softly. "What your father is doing is wrong, and you have every right to be hurt." As we picked at our salads, Diana seemed to be gathering her thoughts, her eyes contemplative. "There is something I think you should know," she finally said, leaning forward. "Something about George that might help you understand why he reached out to you." I looked up, curious. "What about him?" "George is Henry's brother, yes. But Henry and George's father, the one who skipped George's graduation, was a very rigid, traditional man. George was estranged from him for years because of that choice. But what you might not know is that I was married once before Henry. A brief, unfortunate union when I was very young." I nodded, listening intently. "When I decided to marry Henry, my own father refused to attend," Diana continued, her voice catching slightly. "He thought it was shameful for me to have a second wedding. He said it would embarrass him in front of his friends. So I had no one to walk me down the aisle." "That's terrible, Diana," I murmured, my own situation suddenly mirrored in hers. "It was George who offered to walk me down the aisle," she said, a small, genuine smile forming on her lips. He was only in his early 30s then, but he understood what it was like to be rejected by a parent. "He told me, Diana, you deserve to be given away by someone who celebrates your happiness, not someone who judges it." Her story resonated with every fiber of my being. I had no idea George did that for you. He never had children of his own, Clara, Diana continued, her gaze steady and loving. But he has been the most wonderful uncle to Ethan and Leo. He attends every school play, every graduation, every important moment. He shows up, Clara. That is what real family does. The implication was clear, a gentle shove toward the right answer. The idea, which had been a whisper, now became a firm, undeniable path. The man who had walked another rejected daughter down the aisle was right there, ready to do it again. And this time he was waiting for my call. I spent the rest of the day considering Diana's story, turning it over in my mind like a precious, fragile stone. The connection between Diana's past and my present was too profound to ignore. Uncle George had always shown genuine, unreserved interest in my life, and he had been nothing but kind since I entered Ethan's orbit. There was a beautiful, poetic justice in the thought of being escorted by a man who truly understood the pain of parental rejection and yet had chosen to lead a life defined by generosity and presence. That evening, I finally picked up the phone and called George. I asked if we could meet for coffee the following day. He agreed immediately, his voice as calm and steady as always. We arranged to meet at a bookstore cafe near his apartment, a perfectly George location. When I arrived, George was already there. He was surrounded by a stack of newly purchased books and 2 vanilla lattes, mine with an extra shot, were waiting on the small wooden table. I took the liberty of ordering your usual, he said, his eyes crinkling with that familiar warmth. Vanilla latte with an extra shot, right? The fact that he remembered such a small, personal detail about me, a detail my own father likely wouldn't have known, only confirmed everything Diana had told me. He paid attention. He cared. After some comfortable small talk about the books he'd bought, I gathered my courage, my heart hammering against my ribs. The question felt huge, monumental. George, there is something I wanted to ask you. I paused, taking a sip of the warm, familiar coffee. He put his cup down, giving me his full, undivided attention. Anything, Clara. I don't know if Ethan told you, but my father has decided not to walk me down the aisle. The words still hurt to say out loud, carrying the weight of years of neglect. George nodded solemnly. Ethan mentioned there was some conflict. I am truly sorry you are experiencing this, dear. I took a deep breath. Diana told me how you walked her down the aisle at her wedding to Henry, and how meaningful that was to her. It was an act of grace that she still holds dear. He didn't speak, just waited, his expression open and compassionate. I was wondering, I started hesitantly, feeling the sting of vulnerability. I would be honored if you would consider doing the same for me. George's expression shifted instantly. It went from surprise to profound, deep emotion. For a long moment, he seemed entirely unable to speak. His usually steady eyes glistened with unshed tears. He looked, quite simply, honored beyond measure. Clara, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion, catching in his throat. I cannot tell you what this means to me. Are you certain? This should be a special moment with someone you are very close to. I am absolutely certain, I insisted, feeling a surge of confidence that banished the last vestiges of doubt. George, you have shown me more genuine interest and support in the years I have known you than my father has in a decade. You see my value, and you celebrate my happiness. I would be proud to have you walk me down the aisle. George reached across the table and took my hand in his. His grip was firm and gentle. Then I accept, Clara. With all my heart. It would be one of the greatest honors of my life. The weight that had been crushing me for weeks suddenly lifted entirely. George was right. Family was about who showed up, not just shared DNA. I had chosen my own family, and they had chosen me back, offering a profound sense of security that no biological link could guarantee. With the largest emotional hurdle cleared, the final days before the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Final vendor confirmations, last-minute welcome bags, and the arrival of excited out-of-town guests. I felt a new sense of peace and a quiet strength about my decision. I made one last, obligatory attempt to reach out to my father, calling him 3 days before the wedding. "Dad, I just wanted to confirm whether you are still planning to come to the reception." "Yes, I should be able to make it after Brooke's event," he replied, sounding distracted, probably already looking at his watch. Probably around 7:30 or 8. I swallowed hard, keeping my tone deliberately neutral. "I also wanted you to know that I have asked Ethan's Uncle George to walk me down the aisle." There was a long pause. "Who?" "George Harris, Ethan's uncle. He's been very supportive throughout our relationship." "I see." His tone was unreadable flat. "Well, I suppose someone has to do it if I cannot be there on time." His dismissive response, the final, casual insult, only confirmed that I had made the absolute right choice. He couldn't even manage a flicker of curiosity, only resentment that a logistical problem had been solved without him. The next day, I focused entirely on the rehearsal dinner and on celebrating the man who would truly be by my side. The path to the altar was now clear, paved not with obligation, but with genuine, chosen love. The night before the wedding, we held a small, intimate rehearsal dinner at an elegant restaurant near the hotel venue in Philadelphia. The room was filled with the easy warmth and laughter of Ethan's family, Diana, Henry, Leo, and, of course, Uncle George. Seeing them all gathered, their joy for us so genuine and palpable, felt like the true beginning of my new life. George was there, looking incredibly distinguished in a tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair immaculate. He carried an air of quiet dignity, but his excitement was unmistakable. He sat next to me, offering quiet words of encouragement and sharing humorous anecdotes about Ethan's childhood. During the dinner, George stood to offer a toast, and the room fell silent. His voice, clear and measured, filled the space. "To Clara and Ethan," he began, raising his glass. "True love, as they say, is not just about finding the right person, but also about creating a family of choice that supports and celebrates you. I have watched your relationship blossom over these years, and the care, the respect, and the profound joy you show each other gives me hope for the future. I am deeply, profoundly honored to play a small role in your special day tomorrow. May your marriage be filled with all the presents and all the commitment you both deserve." Tears welled up in my eyes, and not just mine. I saw Diana wiping her own eyes discreetly. George's toast wasn't generic. It was deeply personal, a subtle acknowledgement of the journey I had taken to reach this point. He was celebrating the family we were forming, the family based on choice and loyalty, a direct contrast to the one based on blood and obligation. Later that evening, as guests began to trickle out, I instinctively checked my phone. Brooke's social media posts had been quiet all day, uncharacteristically so. Curiosity, or perhaps a final, bitter need for confirmation, prompted me to look one last time. The latest posts were jarring. They weren't grand, professional shots from a country club. They were grainy, poorly lit photos from what was clearly Brooke's own apartment. The decorations were minimal, a few cheap balloons and a banner. The hundreds of attendees she had boasted about were nowhere to be seen. The photos showed maybe a dozen people, mostly her friends from the gym and a few colleagues. There was no corporate branding, no mention of the senior broker achievement, and certainly no sign of a massive, firm-sponsored celebration. It was clearly not the grand corporate event she had described. It was a regular house party, one she had deliberately scheduled and inflated solely to conflict with my wedding and force Dad's hand. The knowledge should have devastated me, but instead I felt a strange, cold sense of clarity, a shock that was strangely liberating. The scales had finally fallen from my eyes. The truth about Brooke was out, naked and undeniable. Her jealousy wasn't a phase or a reaction to Mom's death. It was a deep, malignant trait that ran to the core of her being. She would sabotage one of the most important days of my life, not for professional gain, but simply out of spite and resentment. I closed the app, turning off my phone, and tucked it into my clutch. Brooke's toxicity wouldn't touch me anymore. The truth, while painful, was clean. I had made the right choice by moving forward, by leaning on George, Diana, and Ethan. Tomorrow wasn't about family drama, it was about love. I rejoined Ethan, who was chatting with his brother. He noticed the sudden calmness in my eyes. "Ready for tomorrow, Mrs. Harris-to-be," he whispered, using the name that would soon be mine. "More than ready," I replied, taking his hand. "Let's go home." I woke up the next morning to the sun streaming through the hotel room curtains in Philadelphia. My 3 bridesmaids, all dear friends from college and work, arrived early, their excitement infectious. As they helped me set up the suite, I felt a familiar, nervous flutter. This was it. The day was here. Around the time the hairstylist was pinning up my elaborate updo, my phone chimed with a text message. It was Dad. "Good luck today, Clara. Brooke's event starts at 11 o'clock. If it wraps up early, I might be able to make the reception by 7 or 8. Save me some cake." Not a word of regret about missing the ceremony. Not even a simple "I love you" or "congratulations." Just a logistical update and a reminder that Brooke's party, the fake party, was still his primary commitment. I handed the phone to my bridesmaid, Sarah, unable to respond. She read it and shook her head, muttering, "He's unbelievable, Clara. Just unbelievable. Put it away. Try not to let him ruin your day." I took her advice. I put the phone away and focused on the joy surrounding me, the love of my chosen family. I knew Dad's message was the last selfish, heartbreaking blow I would receive from him. Now I was ready for the day to be claimed back, step by step by the kindness of others. And the first act of profound kindness was already knocking at the door. Around noon, there was a quiet, respectful knock at the hotel suite door. When my bridesmaid, Maya, opened it, Uncle George was standing there. He was immaculately dressed in his navy tuxedo, holding a small, antique-looking gift box. "I hope I'm not intruding on the preparations," he said, his voice low and considerate. "I just wanted to drop this off for Clara before the ceremony. I'll be back an hour before we leave." I invited him in, touched by his thoughtfulness. My bridesmaids, sensing the importance of the moment, discreetly moved to the bedroom area of the suite, giving us a moment of privacy. "You look absolutely radiant, my dear," George said, his eyes crinkling with genuine, fatherly warmth. "Ethan is a very, very fortunate young man. Thank you for coming by, George. And thank you for everything else," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. He handed me the small, rectangular box. "I wanted you to have this today. It belonged to my mother, and I've been saving it for a truly special occasion." Inside was a delicate, vintage handkerchief, edged with intricate lace and embroidered with tiny blue forget-me-nots. "Something old, something blue," George explained softly. "My mother carried it on her wedding day back in 1930. I thought perhaps you might like to have it with you today. Tears welled in my eyes again, but these were tears of gratitude, not sadness. The sentiment was overwhelming. It is beautiful, George. I would be honored. There is one more thing, he added, reaching into the pocket of his tuxedo vest. Diana asked me to give you this. It was meant to be a surprise. He handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a paintbrush crossed with a pen, a small, intricate symbol that perfectly represented my lifelong passion for art and literature. Diana remembered you telling her how much you loved both writing and painting as a child, George explained. She wanted you to have a reminder of your creative spirit on your wedding day, a piece of yourself to carry forward. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, the profound care from people who had no obligation to me by blood, overwhelmed me. They were giving me physical pieces of their own history and a symbol of my future, offering more connection and love in these 10 minutes than my father had managed in the last 10 years. Please thank her for me, I managed, fastening the bracelet around my wrist. I will thank her properly later, but this means so much. George nodded, understanding the depth of my emotion. I should let you continue getting ready, dear. I'll see you at the anteroom before the ceremony. I'll be waiting. As the afternoon progressed, I focused entirely on the joy of the day. My bridesmaids helped me into my gown, the fitted lace, the sweetheart neckline. My hair was swept up, adorned with small white flowers. With my mother's pearl earrings, Diana's bracelet, and George's handkerchief tucked into my bouquet, I felt anchored, supported, and ready. At 10 minutes before 4, I made my way downstairs to the garden terrace where the ceremony would take place. Through the glass doors, I could see the 90 guests seated in white chairs, the floral arch where Ethan waited with the officiant, and the string quartet playing softly. George was waiting in the small anteroom. He looked slightly nervous, but impeccably composed. When he saw me, his expression was one of pure, unrestrained pride. "Ready, my dear?" he asked gently. I nodded, suddenly too emotional to speak, but the confidence was back. George offered his arm, firm and steady. As the first notes of Pachelbel's canon in D began to play, the doors opened before us. Walking down the aisle with Uncle George beside me, I felt a curious blend of emotions. There was still a pang of sadness, a small, familiar echo, that my father had chosen to miss this monumental moment. But that sadness was utterly overshadowed by the profound gratitude for the man who was currently supporting me, the man who had stepped in with such grace, kindness, and understanding. George walked with the rhythm of a man who knew he was fulfilling a sacred duty, not just a substitution. Then I saw Ethan. His face, as he watched me approach, was a landscape of raw emotion, love, wonder, and tears. In that moment, seeing the man who had chosen me and the man who was supporting us both, I knew with absolute certainty that we were creating our own family, one built on mutual respect and genuine care. My heart was full. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for, and the family I needed was all right here. The choice had been made, and it was the right one. The ceremony was a dream, perfectly short, deeply personal, and filled with the overwhelming sense of rightness. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising to support each other's dreams, to communicate honestly, and most importantly, to choose each other every single day. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the applause from our guests seemed to wrap around us like a collective, warm embrace. The cocktail hour and the elegant reception that followed were a blur of champagne, laughter, heartfelt toasts, and joyous dancing. Henry, Ethan's father, gave a moving speech, welcoming me to the family not as an addition, but as the final necessary piece. George's earlier toast was quoted several times, bringing happy tears to many eyes as he spoke about the privilege of witnessing young love blossom. By 8:30 p.m., it was clear that my father, Bob, wouldn't even make it to the reception's main events. I tried not to let the absence dampen my spirits, focusing instead on sharing our first dance to our favorite song, letting the music and Ethan's presence drown out the disappointment. As the evening progressed, however, I noticed a familiar, slightly frazzled face arrive near the entrance. My cousin Mark. Mark was my mother's nephew, a kind, slightly anxious man who had always been neutral in the long-running feud between Brooke and me. He was one of the few family members who had maintained a relationship with both of us over the years. I greeted him with a warm hug, commenting on his late arrival. "I'm so sorry, Clara," he said, looking genuinely apologetic. "I stopped by Brooke's event first, thinking I could make both, but, well, I guess you know why I'm late." "The traffic from the country club?" I asked, forcing a light tone, unwilling to let the negativity surface. Mark's face tightened. He guided me quietly to a corner of the reception hall, away from the DJ and the dancing, his expression suddenly serious. "Clara, I need to tell you something. That party Brooke had today, it wasn't what she told everyone. It wasn't a work event at all." My stomach tightened violently. The realization from the night before was now being confirmed, not by social media, but by family. "What do you mean, Mark?" "It was just a regular gathering at her apartment. Maybe 15 people total, mostly her friends from the gym and a couple of coworkers. There was no company recognition, no senior broker, achievement celebration, nothing corporate about it. The implications were staggering, the malice breathtaking. So she lied about the whole thing, just to create a conflict with my wedding." Mark nodded grimly. "That's not all, Clara. I overheard her talking to Dad. She's been telling him for months that you didn't really want him here, that you only asked him to walk you down the aisle out of obligation, a kind of spiteful, check-the-box exercise." "What?" I gasped, the betrayal a bitter taste in my mouth. "That is completely and utterly false. I wanted him here. I've always wanted him in my life." "I know," Mark said, pulling out his phone. He showed me a text exchange between him and Brooke from several months earlier. In it, Brooke openly admitted to scheduling her party on June 15th deliberately. She wrote that she wanted to force Dad to choose, and that she was preparing the ground by telling him I had been saying horrible, ungrateful things about him to the family. The shock was strangely validating. All these years, I had thought I was the paranoid one, exaggerating Brooke's subtle sabotage. Here was the proof, cold and undeniable, that she had been actively, maliciously driving a wedge between my father and me since Mom died. "Does Dad know any of this?" I asked, my voice trembling again. Mark shook his head. "I don't think so. I tried to tell him today at her place, but Brooke kept interrupting, hovering, and eventually pulled him away before I could show him this." He held up the phone. "I am so sorry, Clara. I should have realized what was happening sooner." I hugged my cousin tightly, grateful for his courage. "Thank you, Mark. At least now I know the truth." As the reception continued, I tried to process the revelation. Part of me wanted to call Dad immediately to expose the lie, but a stronger part recognized that this was my wedding night. I deserved to enjoy the joy that was present, not chase the ghost of the family I used to have. I rejoined Ethan on the dance floor, pushing thoughts of Brooke and Dad aside for the moment. The truth was out there now. and it would wait until the celebration was over. But fate, as I would soon discover, had other plans, and the truth was about to arrive, uninvited on the dance floor. The reception was beginning to wind down around 10:30 p.m. Only about 40 guests remained, the true core of our friends and family, when I noticed a sudden commotion near the entrance. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized my father's tall figure. Bob was finally entering the ballroom. He looked uncomfortable, his suit slightly wrinkled, wearing the tired expression of a man who had rushed through heavy traffic. Ethan noticed him at the same moment and squeezed my hand. "Want me to run interference, sweetheart?" I shook my head. "No, I need to handle this." My father approached, holding a small, brightly wrapped gift bag awkwardly. "Congratulations," he said stiffly, leaning in for an equally stiff, shallow hug. "Sorry I'm late." Brooke's thing ran longer than expected. The casual way he referenced missing my entire ceremony, the most important part, made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. "I'm glad you could make it for the last hour of the reception, Dad." If he detected the sarcasm, he didn't acknowledge it. He glanced around the elegant room, taking in the remnants of the wedding cake and the dancing guests. "It looks like it was a nice wedding," he commented, as if discussing a movie he'd missed the opening of. "It was beautiful," I replied, my voice firm. "Perfect, actually." An uncomfortable silence fell between us before he thrust the gift bag toward me. "This is from Brooke and me. A set of crystal wine glasses." "Thank you," I said, setting the bag aside without opening it. "Would you like a drink? The bar is still open." He nodded, and we walked to the bar together. As the bartender prepared his scotch, my father finally asked the question I had been expecting. "So, who ended up walking you down the aisle?" "George Harris," I replied clearly. "Ethan's uncle." My father frowned slightly, the disapproval evident. "The older gentleman in the navy tuxedo? The one who gave that toast earlier?" I nodded, scanning the room and spotting George chatting easily with Diana and Henry at a nearby table. "Yes, that's him." "You had a stranger walk you down the aisle?" His tone was incredulous, as if I had made an absurd, petty choice. "He is not a stranger to me," I said firmly, the years of pain finally bubbling to the surface. "He has been part of Ethan's family for years, and he has shown more genuine interest in my life and happiness than you have in a very long time." My father's face flushed with anger. "That is not fair, Clara. I have always supported you." "Have you, Dad?" I challenged him. "You missed my art scholarship ceremony in high school because Brooke told you I didn't want you there. You forgot my college graduation dinner until Ethan's parents reminded you. And now you skipped my wedding ceremony for Brooke's fake party." "Fake party? What are you talking about?" he demanded. At that moment, Mark, my cousin, approached us, perhaps sensing the tension. "Uncle Bob, I'm glad you made it, even if it's just for the end of the reception." My father nodded curtly. "Mark, what is this Clara is saying about Brooke's party being fake?" Mark looked between us, swallowing hard. "I was just telling Clara earlier, Uncle Bob. The party today wasn't a work event. It was just a regular get-together at Brooke's apartment, maybe 15 people total." "That can't be right," my father insisted, his confusion real. "Brooke said it was for her senior broker promotion. The firm was sponsoring it." "I asked her colleague, Sarah, about it," Mark replied calmly. "There was no promotion, no company event. It was just a party Brooke planned on the same day as Clara's wedding." My father's expression shifted from disbelief to utter confusion. Before he could respond further, George approached our small group. "Clara, Ethan is looking for you. I believe it is almost time for the sparkler send-off." My father stared at George with barely concealed hostility. "You must be the uncle who walked my daughter down the aisle." George extended his hand politely. "George Harris, you must be Robert. It is good to finally meet you." My father ignored the outstretched hand. "I don't understand why my daughter needed to have a stranger take my place at her wedding." "Dad, stop it," I hissed, mortified by his petulant behavior. George remained utterly composed, lowering his hand. "Mr. Evans, I understand you are upset, but this is neither the time nor the place for this conversation. Today is about Clara and Ethan's marriage, not about past grievances. Don't tell me what this day is about." My father snapped. "She is my daughter." "Then perhaps you should have acted like her father," George replied evenly, his voice quiet but carrying the full, unyielding weight of truth. Being a father means showing up, not just when it's convenient, or when you've been manipulated into believing your presence is preferred, but when it matters most. The simple, unadorned truth of George's words seemed to hit my father like a physical blow. He stared at George, then at me. His anger suddenly deflated, replaced by a look that was almost pure shame. "I need to go," he said abruptly, pulling out his phone. "I need to speak with Brooke." "Dad, please," I pleaded. "Can this wait until tomorrow? This is supposed to be a celebration." "I need to know if what you are saying is true," he insisted, already dialing, stepping away from our group. George placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry about this, Clara. Should I get Ethan?" I nodded, feeling overwhelmed. George disappeared, returning moments later with my new husband. Ethan quickly wrapped a protective arm around me. Before I could explain, my father returned, his face flushed, his eyes wild with a sudden, devastating fury. "She hung up on me," he choked out. "I'm going to her apartment right now to get the truth." "She has been lying to you for years, Dad," I said, my voice breaking with the finality of it. "She's been deliberately driving a wedge between us since Mom died. She told you I didn't want you here. She told you I only asked out of obligation." The realization seemed to hit him all at once, the years of manipulation, the truth of his favorite daughter. He looked at me, then at George, standing strong and supportive beside me. "So you replaced me with him?" he demanded, gesturing toward George with a hostile sweep of his hand. "Some random old man you barely know?" George took a step forward, his professorial calm unshakable. "I am not a random old man, Robert. I am the man who showed up for your daughter when she needed a father most. You missed the beginning of her life, and you just missed the beginning of her marriage. That is your reality, not hers. Now, please, let us enjoy this wedding." My father stared at the three of us, Ethan, George, and me, a united front. He stammered, his shame winning out over his anger. I need to go." Without another word, he turned and strode out of the ballroom, leaving the heavy, uncomfortable silence of a truth exposed in his wake. Ethan pulled me close, rocking me gently as the ballroom door swung shut behind my father. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, tears finally falling, but these were cleansing tears. "I just wish he could have seen the truth sooner, Ethan. All those wasted years." George's steady presence was instantly comforting. Diana and Henry joined us, their faces filled with love. "Don't let this overshadow your beautiful day, Clara," Diana whispered, hugging me tightly. "You and Ethan deserve all the happiness in the world." We rejoined the remaining guests for the sparkler send-off, running through a magical tunnel of light to our waiting car. Despite the chaotic confrontation, I felt a curious sense of peace as we drove away. The truth was finally, brutally out in the open. Whatever happened next, I had a new family who valued me, and I had married the love of my life. Ethan and I spent 2 blissful weeks honeymooning in Greece. The distance allowed me to process everything: the shock of Brooke's malice, the tragedy of Dad's blindness, and the incredible grace of George's intervention. I had turned off notifications from Dad and Brooke, determined to enjoy this precious time. But when we returned to our Philadelphia apartment, reality was waiting in my voicemail and email inbox. There were 5 messages from my father, each one progressively more apologetic and raw. The final one, left just 3 days before our return, was heartbreakingly honest. "Clara, I don't know if you're listening to these messages, but I need to tell you that you were right about Brooke. After the wedding, I went to her apartment and confronted her with those text messages Mark showed me. At first, she denied everything, but when I pressed her, she finally admitted the truth. She has been manipulating both of us for years, telling me you didn't want me in your life while telling you I was too busy for you. I cannot believe I was so blind. I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I hope someday you will give me a chance to make this right. I am so sorry I missed your wedding. It was unforgivable." There were no messages from Brooke, just a terse, cold email stating she was taking some time away from family drama and would be traveling for work indefinitely. I sat on the couch, stunned, Ethan sitting beside me, holding my hand. "What are you thinking?" he finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me is vindicated that Dad finally sees the truth, but another part is just intensely sad for all the years we lost. Do you want to call him back?" "Not yet," I replied, needing time to define my boundaries. I need some time to figure out what I want this relationship to look like going forward, if I even want one at all. Over the following months, we began a careful, tentative reconciliation. I maintained contact with Ethan's family, especially George, who called every Sunday evening to check in. "How are you doing, Clara?" he would ask, his voice warm with genuine concern. George never pressured me about reconnecting with my father, but his own experiences offered invaluable perspective. "Forgiveness is not about excusing the behavior," he told me during one call. "It is about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. Whatever you decide about your relationship with your father, make sure it brings you peace." A month after our return, I finally called my father. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between Philadelphia and Bethlehem. He was already there when I arrived, looking older and more tired than I remembered. "Clara, thank you for coming," he said, his voice thick with emotion. We talked for nearly 3 hours, going through painful memories, misunderstandings, and years of missed connection. There were tears on both sides, moments of recrimination, and eventually the beginnings of understanding. "I want to try to rebuild our relationship," Dad said as we prepared to leave. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you are willing, I would like to get to know the amazing woman you have become." "I need to think about it," I replied honestly, establishing a firm boundary. "This is not something we can fix in one conversation, but I am willing to try." He nodded, accepting my terms. "Take all the time you need. I will be here when you are ready." Over the next year, we slowly built a new foundation. Weekly phone calls became regular visits. I introduced him properly to Ethan's family, including George, who displayed remarkable grace in welcoming my father despite their tense first meeting. 3 months after our first reunion, Dad suggested a family dinner at his home, including Ethan's parents and George. It was a tentative, monumental step toward blending our families. After dinner, I found my father and George in the living room, deep in conversation. "I want to thank you for being there for Clara when I was not," Dad was saying, his voice low with contrition. "Walking her down the aisle should have been my privilege, but you did it with honor." George nodded thoughtfully. "She is a remarkable young woman, Robert. You should be very proud of who she has become, largely through her own strength and determination." "I am," my father agreed. "I just wish I had been more present to see it happening." Brooke remained distant, occasionally sending impersonal texts but avoiding any real conversation about what had happened. I came to accept that some relationships might never be repaired, and that was okay. 6 months after the wedding, we hosted our first Thanksgiving as a married couple. Our dining table was filled with Ethan's family, my father, Cousin Mark, and a few close friends. Brooke was invited, but declined without explanation. As we went around the table, sharing what we were thankful for, my father's voice broke with emotion. "I am thankful for second chances," he said simply, "and for a daughter whose capacity for forgiveness humbles me every day." When it was George's turn, he smiled warmly around the table, raising his glass of cider. "I am thankful for the reminder that family is created through love and choice, not just biology. And I am especially thankful to have gained another niece in Clara, whose courage and grace inspire me." On our 1-year anniversary, George surprised us with a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "1 year ago, I had the privilege of walking this beautiful young woman down the aisle to marry the man she loves," he said. "What began as a response to absence has become one of the greatest gifts of my life, the opportunity to be part of Clara and Ethan's journey. May your marriage continue to grow in strength and joy, and may you always remember that true family consists of those who choose to love you, even when it is difficult." As I reflect on the journey that brought us here, I realize that sometimes life's greatest wounds can lead to the most unexpected healing. My father's absence on my wedding day led directly to Uncle George's presence, which in turn created the necessary bridge for my father's genuine return to my life. The family I have now includes both those I was born to, Dad, who is trying, and those I have chosen, Ethan, Diana, Henry, and George, all imperfect, all valuable in their own ways. I learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment and creating boundaries that protect your heart while allowing for growth and change. The father who walks you down the aisle should indeed be someone who has walked beside you through life's challenges, supporting and loving you unconditionally. Sometimes that person shares your DNA, and sometimes they come into your life through other paths. What matters most is who shows up for all the ordinary days that follow. I am fortunate to have found my tribe, the people who choose me every single day, just as I choose them. Thanks for listening my story.